Hello all of you and good afternoon. My name is Detlev Schulz and I'm here to do the Greek readings for you and also to share with you a few comments on sermon preparation. The text we are looking today is taken from John chapter 12 verse 20 to 43. It's a long passage, so we probably won't be able to get through it in its entirety and all its details will not be covered. You probably are expecting texts such as those that come from Isaiah 52 and 53, also maybe a text from Hebrews or the Gospel of John chapter 19 or 20, for texts that speak about Jesus' death on the cross for Good Friday. This text here that we are looking at in John 12, however, is also very helpful to think about Christ's death on the cross. And he died for us a satisfactory death vicariously. And on a side note, we also think a little bit about those verses that remind us of following Jesus Christ. And we are thinking on Good Friday also of those people who have followed Jesus Christ and paid their discipleship with their own lives through torture and death. However, all focus is here on Jesus Christ. If we look at the preceding text, we will realize that there is the triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. And there's also a quotation from Zechariah 9 verse 9. And it says there in that passage that the disciples did not understand what Jesus was saying and what he was doing. However, when they saw their master dying the death on the cross, they finally understood what his glory is. So that passage in the triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem already reflects the glory of Jesus Christ showing forth. And then as we proceed to the text that is following the one we are supposed to look at right now, you will see therein that the term glory is very pervasive in it. So I am immediately, as I read the text, struck by the term doxa, or doxaxein, which means to be glorified. And let me here now underline the passages that speak to the glory of Jesus Christ. And that will go here to the verses basically in 23, where Jesus says, "But Jesus answered to them, saying," after the disciples Andrew and Philip came to him, "The hour has come that I, the Son of Man, may be glorified." So we have here doxats the, that the Son of Man may be glorified, taken up basically again further down in the passage where Jesus then says, "Father, glorify your name." And he says the voice came from heaven and God said, "I have glorified and again I will glorify." And as we go further down the text, we will also see that it's picked up again further down to the end of our passage in verses 41, where we see there that these things were said by Isaiah because he believed the glory or knew the glory, his glory of Jesus Christ. And then it goes on to verse 43 there, and it says, "For the glory here of man is what they loved, more than the glory of God." So instead of seeking the glory of God, they chose to choose the glory of man instead. So there's a certain irony here in this text. If you think about the glory of a king, that is also the Messiah understood by the crowd that receives Jesus into Jerusalem. Here the glory is reflected something in a different way, namely to be associated with the cross, with Christ's death on the cross. And that's very uniquely John's version and understanding of Christ's death. That is, in humiliation, glory comes forth. Okay, in suffering, there is finally triumph and life. So when I look at this text here and seeing its length, I think I will concentrate somewhat on a passage here within this text that speaks to the very death of Jesus Christ and its glorification. And here I will go then as I move on further down into verses 27 following. 27, 28, I want to go to 29 here, and 30. And there also I will go further on because it also is highlighted, this glorification of Jesus' death on the cross, in verses 32. And in 33 also he speaks a little bit about this, he said, indicating this as a sign of what death he's about to die, apothneskein. So here I would concentrate, therefore, after I have read the passages further down that speaks a little bit to the fruit, that the fruit needs to die in order to bring life forth, that is also reflecting on Jesus' death, and it also says something about service and following him, and ultimately also we think of the service of Jesus Christ that he did for humanity. And now we move to passage 27 to 33, which I think is the key to this passage here. Namely there that Jesus says now, and I translate, "Now my soul is burdened. What shall I say? Father, save me from this hour." In other words, he's saying, should I try to escape this moment here of death? And he says, no, but because the hour has come, Father, glorify your name. And a voice said from heaven, I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. In verse 29, therefore the crowd standing and hearing said, something has happened, namely a thunder has happened here. And others said, an angel has spoken to him. But Jesus answered and said, in verse 30 here, therefore my voice has happened, but it is for you that it has happened, this voice. Now judgment, crisis, is over this world. And now the ruler of the world, this world, will be cast out, ekbalein. Verse 32, and I will be lifted up from this earth, and all, pantas, all people, universal reconciliation here, I will lift up to myself. And this he said as a sign, indicating it as a sign that by this death he is about to die. So it's indicating here that he will die the death on the cross. As you know, the Apostle John keeps count of the miracles. And so we could say that in the list of miracles that he has done and shown forth to the crowd and to the people, this one stands and is elevated to the highest, namely the one of dying the death on the cross for us all. If we then go on and see that precisely because of all these miracles and signs that he has done, they were not recognized by the people. And in this passage there's a quotation from Isaiah saying, therefore, that God has hardened them, and for this reason they are unable to fully understand with their eyes and their hearts exactly what was going on here. And then in verse 31 it says, these things Isaiah said because he knew his glory, and he said about him these things. So some of those leaders, some of them also believed in him. But because of the Pharisees, they were not confessing in order they would not be thrown out or be excluded from the synagogue. And 43, because they loved the glory of man more than the glory of God. This is the text really here in its brevity as I have explained it. And I would also highlight, in addition to this, therefore, some aspects as that I have already addressed, namely here in verse 32, which I see as a very important one, that I may be lifted up, so that all may be lifted up. So that point I would highlight in my sermon as well, and trying to indicate what Jesus means, his death means for all of us and all of humanity. I would then also point out to the dialectic here, the tension between light and darkness. As you can see in our text, it talks a lot about that you should have light and not be in the scotia, in the darkness, and try to avoid the darkness. And Jesus reminds them that he is the light, and that they look at him. So the gist of the sermon here, if I were to speak and to preach about it, I would do as follows. And I don't know whether exactly the outline is true to what you would like it to be. However, as I look at it, and I would say, looking at the text here and coming from the triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, I would say that the first thing that strikes me as a theme for this text is that the glory of the King, namely the Messiah, that Jesus, that the crowd has come to see, and the God-fearers, looks totally different. And then I would highlight this very fact by saying, seek his glory and find it at the cross. So I would speak about the very passages in verse 27 following, where Jesus has died for us all, and that it is to be glorified, and ekbalein, throwing out the actual ruler of this world, which is the devil and Satan, and putting him under his feet, and then drawing all people to himself. I would make that the first part of my theme here, and to highlight that to John it is absolutely crucial that already with the cross, and not only with resurrection or finally his ascension, exaltation starts, but you posit and put it already at the cross. And then secondly, his glory is for us. Here I would say that we are also to be aware of the tension between light and darkness. We also need to know that there is the seed that must bear fruit, and that we must come and serve Jesus Christ, as this passage has reflected. And of course, now we have to ask ourselves, in our life, as we look at the cross of Jesus Christ, we also need to realize that not everything is going to be perfect. And who should I quote, if not Dietrich Bonhoeffer, to highlight just briefly this very aspect? And I'd like to read a short little passage from Life Together here. He begins by this. Jesus Christ lived in the midst of his enemies. At the end, all his disciples deserted him. On the cross, he was utterly alone, surrounded by evildoers and mockers. For this cause he had come, to bring peace to the enemies of God. So the Christian too belongs not in the seclusion of a cloistered life, but in the thick of foes. There is his commission, his work. And then he quotes Luther here. The kingdom is to be in the midst of your enemies, and he who will not suffer this does not want to be of the kingdom of Christ. He wants to be among friends, to sit among roses and lilies, not with the bad people, but with the devout people. Oh, you blasphemers and betrayers of Christ, if Christ had done what you are doing, who would ever have been spared? The fact is, as Luther would say, is that our life is not always a life of roses and lilies. And we are reminded, therefore, of the cross of Jesus Christ on Good Friday, that he died for all of us, and then rewards us with the greatest gift, the most glorious gift we can get, which is life eternal. Thank you.